All right. So by way of introduction, last week we talked about this idea that these men were trying to discourage them and the discouragement that the children of Israel had. And then we looked at Nehemiah's examples and how, because he was a man of prayer and a man of action and a man who triumphed over opposition, that he is put in this position of leadership. And they begin resuming the work, and the work, therefore, is entitled of basically holding a sword or a shield in one hand and holding the tools to build the wall in the other hand. And while some watched, the other would work, and while those ones watched, the others would work. And it shows really the diligence and the determination of what they're doing for God. And if you look at the three words below Nehemiah here, this book is really based on determination, zeal, and dedication. And when you think about your relationship to God, do those three characteristics characterize you in your relationship with God? Determination, no matter what, I'm going to do God's will. No matter what, I'm going to take God's word for it as truth. No matter what I do, I'm going to try to desire God's will in my life, that determination. What about the zeal? Are you excited about it? Are you so overflowing with the joy of God that you can't help but to share it with other people? That it kind of defines who you are. And when people see you, they see God. And when they're going through troubles, they go, I'm going to go talk to them because they're going to pray for me. You know, we should be the type of people in our community that when somebody is going through something tough, they should want to pick up the phone and call us because they know our response will be, let me pray with you. That zeal, that passion, that excitement. What about our dedication? Can somebody give me a basic idea of the difference between determination and dedication? What is the difference in those two words? Because they have a lot of similarities, right? But what's the difference?
Determination is your mindset, and then dedication is actually doing it.
Okay, yeah, so it has a little bit of idea of, hey, this is what I'm set out and I'm determined to do. Well, if I get discouraged amongst that, am I going to maintain dedication to follow through with the job? And we see that really unfold in this last chapter, chapter 5 of Nehemiah, and the idea that, listen, they wanted to discourage them. It was hard enough to rebuild this wall, let alone now they have to rebuild the wall while they protect themselves. And not only could that be mentally draining, but it's also physically draining. This is not like, hey, hold this pocket knife while you put this wall together, right? Keep a pocket knife in your pocket or holster your gun. You know, they couldn't pull out their Kimber 9mm when the enemies were coming across. So they had these huge swords, these swords that are 3, 4, 5 feet long. Some of them weighed more than some of you ladies. And they had these shields that were massive, and they're trying to protect their husbands, and they're trying to protect their wives, and they're trying to protect their children. So now a dad and a mom not only has the responsibility of protecting their wives and their husband or their spouse, they have the protection of their children, but now they're having to protect the children of Israel. And the discouragement that would have ensued. But I love what happens towards the end of chapter 4. And last week we kind of ended in chapter 14. But it says in verse 15, when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, we all returned to the wall, each to his work. From that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, and half held the spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. And the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah, who were building on the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand, and in another held his weapon. And each of the builders had his sword strapped to his side while he built. The man who stood sounded the trumpets next to him beside him. And he said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, the work is great and widely spread out, and we are separated on the wall, far from one another. In the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. I love the imagery there. If you go in and look up the historical document of Josephus, Josephus is not inspired. Josephus was basically a Jewish historian that lived during the time of Christ. In Josephus's account of Nehemiah rebuilding the wall, he said that they basically positioned each trumpeter about 500 yards away. So 5 football fields distanced from each other. And the idea was, hey, if Joe and Mary are over here working on this section of the wall, and they see attackers coming, the trumpeter that's standing by Joe and Mary, they're to sound their trumpets so everybody that's throughout the entire project, all of the children of Israel, all these people within these walls can rally to help these people out. So Ben, come up here real quick for me. It's your fault for calling Molly out, so I'm going to call you out. Okay, Ben, he looks like a nice, decent young man. Just don't look real close. But he's fit, athletic. Okay, drug a deer out this week. Studley. Okay, I want you to pick this table up. And this is, for those of you who are going to be at the teen devotional tonight, Ben's going to be my gopher right now. So I want you to pick this table up without moving the ball.
Without moving the ball.
And you can't go underneath it. Just because I don't want you to look too much like a fool. Okay? Good. The ball moved. All right. Sorry.
I'm impressed.
Okay, yeah. I'm impressed you did it. Here, that's actually better. I got to find a smaller ball or a ball that rolls better for tonight. Thanks, Ben. Okay? No, you can't leave yet. So, on a level of difficulty, okay, was that pretty difficult? It was difficult, okay? Unfortunately, this is what happens in our lives. We try to do that by ourselves. So let's put some illustrative purpose or analogy to the table and to the ball. The table is our life, and the ball is sin. We don't want anything to do with sin. And as long as that ball, that sin, doesn't move, it doesn't affect me, okay? But as soon as it moves, that sin is affecting me somehow, right? The children of Israel, they're in the wall. And they're trying to protect each other. But in their situation, this ball is the enemy. And every time it moves, they're in trouble. Okay? So what happens is Ben, go ahead and pick up the table again. You don't have to do it the same way. Just pick it up. Make the ball move, Ben. No. Okay. Regardless, it's not easy. Even last time you strained over it, the ball still moved. Right? Now, you thought you had it until you set it down and the ball moved. Okay? Clayton, will you come up here for a minute? And Brock. And Molly. The only Molly in class tonight, this morning. Okay, Blake. And Holly. And Shauna. Now, don't be getting around the table. You don't know what you think you know what I'm going to have you do, but you don't yet. Now, ideally, the idea would be what? Pick up the table, right? Do you think combined, you two, all of you, could pick up the table without the ball moving?
No.
You don't think you could?
If it was coordinated enough.
Okay, so go ahead. You guys figure out how you could do this. Pick up the table without the ball moving. The trumpet was just sound. You heard the trumpet. You all ran. Ben's going, hey, sound the trumpet because the enemies are here. Pick up the table without the ball moving. The ball moved.
It did wiggle.
Put it down. Remove the coat. You thought you could do it with the coat, but the ball still moved. You guys are going to have to coordinate a little better than this.
Oh. It's a lopsided ball.
You think sin's easy?
There we go. Let's get hold of that. Here we go.
Okay, did the ball move? You guys see the ball move? Ball still moved, right? Only because the table is moving. Is it? No, the ball wiggled. Even as, I don't know, Brock's just got a shaky hand. You have too much caffeine this morning?
No.
Okay? You guys can have a seat. A couple things. First of all, our enemies want us to fail. They want us to fail, especially. Have you ever had somebody that maybe does not like your Christian ways, and as soon as they find out you're a Christian, they try to make you stumble. They try to do things to get you to trip up, just so they can say, "See, I told you weren't perfect." Okay, Satan wants that ball to move. Therefore, he takes this ball of sin and he says, "Chris, catch." Now, all of a sudden, before Chris even knows it, what happens? He's got sin all over his hands and behind the back. It's not sin anymore, but now it's our enemies. The church is designed to rally together. Now, obviously, when Ben was up here alone, it was a lot harder for Ben to keep the ball from moving, right? I got all of everybody else up here, and the ball still moved. It didn't matter what man tried to do, the ball still moved. Clayton tried to cheat with my coat. The ball still moved. Then we had two guys trying to hold it. The ball still moved. I'll let my volunteers back up here real quick. Yeah. The ball's not moving. Notice the ball is not moving. It's stationary. So the only reason the ball will move now is by what? If who moves it? Man. Right? So the ball's sin. The ball is our enemies. Okay? So go ahead and put your hands on the table. It's already moving. God said, "Here's my son." Pick up the table without the ball moving. God said, "Here's my son. He's going to defeat all your enemies." The ball's not moving. You know why the ball's not moving? Because God took sin out of it. God took our enemies out of it. And in Nehemiah, you can put the table down. You guys can have a seat. Thank you. In Nehemiah chapter 5, God said, "Don't worry about your enemies. I've got it. I've got it under control. It's not going to be you, Nehemiah, or you, Joe and Mary, or you, Joseph, or you, Steve, back there, that's going to be able to defeat all these enemies." Who defeated the enemies? God defeated the enemies. Look at what the text says. As they continue down, he says in verse 20, "In the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there." Look at it. Our God will fight for us. Our God is going to handle it. See, that's our problem as human beings. I didn't even plan for everybody to try to figure out a way to stop the ball moving. I didn't think, Clayton, that's genius, picking up my coat and trying to get it from moving. But tell me, isn't that what we try to do? Isn't that what we try to do as human beings, trying to fight our own battles instead of saying, "God will fight this battle for me. God's going to defeat my enemies. God's going to take away my sin." Because it doesn't matter. That ball, I don't even know, it came in one of those cheesy things. You put a hoop on the back of the door. It doesn't hold air. It's lopsided. You're right. But guess what? Is every sin going to present itself as something easy to handle? No. Is every enemy going to come up and announce its presence? "Hey, I'm an enemy of yours. I'm going to destroy you." No. It's not easy. And it wasn't easy for these people in Nehemiah's time to rebuild this wall. Now, Nehemiah could have said, "You know what? I'm going to come up with this crafty plan." And he did. We talked about Nehemiah's example and who he was and how he did what he did. We talked about his leadership and how he was capable and passionate and how he was dedicated to his leadership, how he had this motivation and prepared and charged the people. But not once did Nehemiah say, because of my crafty plans. Not once did Nehemiah say, because I'm a leader, because I am a man of prayer, because I. Every time Nehemiah made the statement that he makes there in verse 20, our God will fight for us. Listen, guys, we got to stop trying to fight our own battles. We got to stop trying to remove our own sin out of our life. A lot of you in here, all of you in here, I know each of you pretty well, for as well as I can, being here for 2 years and 1 year's under COVID. But all of you are good people. As I look around the room, I would trust all of you, I believe, with my children. The school board trusts you with a lot of children. I would trust you with my kids, all of you in here. You guys are all good people. But being a good person doesn't take away the sin. Being a good person doesn't fight our battles. Only our dedication and our commitment to God and God taking away our sin, God fighting our battles, that's the only way we'll have success. That's the only way they will have success. So we read down through this, and they labored and they worked and they held the spears and it was working. And then what happened? In chapter 5, Nehemiah deals with oppression from within. Sounds more and more like the church. The more and more chapters we go through this book. So, Nehemiah says, okay, they're working together. God's going to fight our battles. I've taken the ball out of the equation. The ball's not moving. God's going to handle it. And the people are buying into it. And all of a sudden, this ball shows back up again. But this time, it's not from outside of the camp. It's within the camp. And you have this oppression from the rich to the poor. And they have this oppression from these people who are wealthy that are only lending money with high interest rates, which we see back in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. That's against God's law. We have all of these ideas of these people and the problem now that's existing within the camp. So who do you think Nehemiah is going to trust to take away the sin, to take away the enemies? God. He's going to do it again. He says, just because the sin's now inside the camp, the same solution exists. Now, I've seen churches. I've seen populations of people. I've seen congregations. I've seen clubs destroyed. Not from outside, but from inside. In fact, statistics show that most destruction takes place from within. Now, it could be a result of various things. For example, in Nehemiah, this was going on for a while. This wasn't like all of a sudden they're working on the wall, now there's this famine, and they need money, they need to feed their families, they need grain, and they don't have money to do it, so they're getting these loans from the world. It doesn't all of a sudden happen. This is something that's happened for a while. But what's happened is the external stresses becomes the straw that what? Breaks the camel's back. No, the straw that breaks the camel's back. The stresses from outside say, you know what? I was stressed about this before, but now I have these other stresses like we could die. I'm having to work with a sword. I'm having to protect my kids and my family, and now I can't even feed them, and they might die. Isn't that how our lives work? You're presented with a stress or a sin. Somebody throws the ball at you. and that sin or that enemy enters your life, and you're like, you know what, I can handle this. This is a little ball. It's easy to catch. It's easy to handle. I can handle that sin. I can handle that enemy. But what happens now if you catch that ball? And now Satan throws 15 more at you. Eventually, what's going to happen? You're going to drop all of them. Because you can't handle all of it. And in our life, that's what happens. We're presented with one sin, and we're like, I got this. At the entrance of that one sin, at the introduction of that one sin, that, when we have one ball, is when we hit our knees and say, God, take that ball away from me. Because I don't know when Satan's going to throw another one at me. When I hear that one trumpet, Ben blows that one trumpet, he's up here by himself. As soon as he realizes the problem, before he even approached the table, he should have sounded that trumpet and said, hey, guys, I need you to rally to me. Because I don't want that ball to move. I don't want that sin to interrupt my life. I don't want my enemies to tear me down. Nehemiah deals with this opposition from outside the camp with God. And as you read through chapter 5, God deals with the opposition within the camp the same way. Look at verse 13. After he presents all this problem, and they had this great assembly, and Nehemiah brought the charge against the people, and Nehemiah said, listen, if you have taken money away from these people unfairly, you're to give it back. You're to give them back what they pawned. These people were having to sell their children into slavery so they could get money to feed themselves. He says, if you bought a child off of one, give it back. You're all the same people. You're all of the same nation. You're to be rallying together. We just talked about these trumpets. Rally together. So he returns, and all this people returned, all the stuff they were missing. And look at verse 12. He says, then they said, we will restore these and require nothing from them. We will do as you say. And I called the priests and made them swear to do all they had promised. I also shook out the fold of my garment and said, so may God shake out every man from his house and from his labor who does not keep this promise. So may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, amen. And they praised the Lord, and the people did as they promised. Once again, Nehemiah says, God's going to handle it. Just like God's fighting our battles, God's going to handle this. God's going to take care of it. God's going to make sure that ball doesn't move. Whether that ball is sin, whether that ball is an enemy from without the camp or an enemy inside the camp. Whether that enemy is outside of the church or that enemy is inside of the church. God says, I've got it. But you have to let me. Now, a couple weeks ago, as we were talking about the beginning of Nehemiah, we talked about this concept of Nehemiah being a man of action. How in the first chapter we see Nehemiah praying, and he's praying and praying and praying. But then he just doesn't stand back and say, okay, I prayed, I've done my part, God will do it. Then what does he do? He then goes to the king and he presents himself as a godly man, and he pushes the progress forward with God's assistance. It's not wrong for us to come up to this world and to see that sin and say, I think I can do it. That's human nature. For some of us more than others. But why would I flirt with sin? Why would I take a chance of that ball moving when I know there's a better solution? I know I shouldn't look at that. I had a young man in Lander who struggled with pornography. Pornography is a big problem in our world. Huge problem. It's caused divorce. It's caused marriages to be broken up. It's caused a lot of really bad things. So I was talking to this young man. So I just can't stop. I keep looking at it. I can't control it. I can't do this. So we took precautionary measures. Went to his parents and got rid of his phone. And he was doing good until he found a Victoria's Secret catalog. And that became his segue. See, when I presented him to that afterward, I said, this is still a problem. You're still going after that, lusting after it. The same problem exists, the same sin exists. He says, but Dustin, it's not pornography. You know what he was doing? He was coming up to the world saying, see if I can move this without touching that sin. Without getting that ball to move. He's flirting with that sin. He's flirting with the problem. Instead of just saying, I cannot. I have to stay away from it. If you were to walk through a bar, not a sin. Not a sin. You don't walk through a bar. Maybe you had to get to the other side. I don't know. Not a sin. But I would tell an alcoholic, tell him blue in the face, do not walk through the bar. Do not flirt with that sin. Do not expose yourself to that problem. Because see, people who aren't alcoholic won't have a problem walking through the bar. They're not tempted with it. But somebody who is, that temptation may be too hard to bear. And they become flirting with that sin. Saying, hey, I'm going to sound the trumpet because I need help. As you guys look around in this room, do you guys feel that whatever sin you're in, whatever sin you struggle with, that you could pick up your phone and sound the trumpet to somebody else in this room? Say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need you to come help me lift this table so we don't move that ball. I need you in my life to keep me accountable. I need you in my life to fight my enemies, to overcome these giants. Many of you have seen the movie Facing the Giants. To overcome these giants in my life, I need you there. Do we have that in this room, in this body? Do you have that person, that somebody? Because our first and foremost respect should be that somebody is God. That we get down on our knees and say, God, fight my battles. Take away that ball. Help me lift this table without that ball moving. And then our second phone call should be to that brother or sister that says, I need help right now so that ball doesn't move. Are you willing to be an accountability partner? Are you willing to look at this chapter in Nehemiah and realize there's going to be opposition outside the camp and there's going to be opposition inside the camp? And sometimes we may not even know where the opposition is coming from. But when it happens, we have to sound those trumpets, rally the troops, lift that table so the ball doesn't move. And all the while, you know what God's going? God's saying, Dustin, stop putting so much pressure on yourself. Because I've already removed the ball. Isn't that awesome? To me, that's awesome. But I'm just like Ben. All right. Challenge accepted. Unfortunately, sometimes Satan puts that sin in my life and I look at it the same way. Challenge accepted. And before long, that ball's rolling off the table and I'm knee deep in sin. Nehemiah is a great applicable book. And I hope this week you can go back through Nehemiah 4 and 5. Realize that there's opposition from outside the camp. Realize that there's opposition inside the camp. And realize that our only success of overcoming that opposition is because God removed the ball.